And so, in addition to putting a microphone in so that you could hear him clearly, we're also videoing this and recording him. Because this is just priceless history that we certainly want to share for the generations to come. So with that, let me formally introduce James King, and then we'll let him speak. James Jimmy King was born on April 2nd, 1933 in Leighton. He was the second son of Lawrence Henderson King and Lucille King, and the grandson of Frank R. King. He had one brother, Henderson King. Jimmy grew up in Leighton, but went off to high school at Battleground Academy in Franklin, Tennessee. After graduating from BGA, he attended Auburn University and then served in the U.S. Army. Thank you for your service, sir.
Yes.
While in Franklin, he met his future wife, Polly Morgan. They were married on June 25th, 1955. Polly was the Leighton librarian from 1978 to 2015 for 37 years. They have 3 children, Anne, Sally, and Allison, 5 grandchildren, Laura, Jesse, Morgan, James, and Rebecca, and 1 great-grandson, Braden. After his time in the Army, he returned to Leighton and began farming. He's an avid horseman, breeding, raising, riding, and training horses most of his life. He also started a horse fencing business. We were talking a little bit earlier when we first got here, telling me about his cowboy days. Because he was a horseman in the area, St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital contacted him to ask if he would sponsor a trail ride as a fundraiser for them. He said yes, and in 1996, he got a few friends together for a trail ride, and they raised a few $1,000s. The Northwest Alabama Saddle Up for St. Jude's Trail Ride has continued for 27 years and has grown to be the largest St. Jude trail ride in the United States. This year it raised $440,000 and has raised over $3 million total. Jimmy was always had a strong interest in the history of North Alabama. He's been the keeper and the storyteller of the personal archives, artifacts, and records of his grandfather, Frank R. King, some of which you can see in that museum next door today. He has a good knowledge of local people, places, and happenings of the past. He was instrumental in the renovation of the Leighton Museum, and its location changed to the Leighton Bank Independent, which again is right next door, and that's where the museum is. So again, I remind you, we're recording this. If you could silence your cell phones, that would help us tremendously with the recording of it. And Mr. King, I turn it over to you.
Okay,
thank you very much.
I appreciate it. All these people here make me feel like I'm somebody.
You are.
Well, Frank King, my granddaddy, he died in their house in
Calling emergency
1939.
services.
I was 6 years old, and I remember him. Well, he was born in 1889, 1869, 2 years before the Civil War. And then when General Dodge came through here with a trainload of soldiers going to Atlanta, to help Sherman burn Atlanta, he had a cavalry with him from Missouri that called themselves the Avenging Angels. Well, Frank King, his mother, and his daddy was off in the Alabama 11th Cavalry fighting, and Nathan Bedford Forrest burnt the railroad bridge, and that train backed up into Leighton, and his mother, Mary Smith, she had Frank King by his hand. He was 5 years old. Little daughter Ann was 7 years old. They walked out on the porch, and those Yankee soldiers started shooting at them. Shot her through the right shoulder, and she went around the house to see if the kids were hit. But little Ann had a bullet over the dress, but it didn't hit her. And they raised horses, and they run the mares and colts in the barn and burnt them. And they burnt Leighton. They burnt McGraves. And something like 40 or 50 houses all in one night and 2 days. And plantations, they just burnt the whole country. And, well, that was his episode for the Civil War with Frank King. But his dad was Hartwood Jr. His mother was Mary Smith. John Smith was her father, and he's buried across the road from Kitty Smith, where she lives out on County Line Road. And he came over here from Germany. He was hired by the British, he was a mercenary. They sent him over here to fight fight the Americans in the Revolution. He saw what was going on over here, so he quit the English and joined the Americans and fought for them. And the Daughters of the Revolution put a marker out there for him that he was a veteran of the Revolutionary War. And that was John Smith. His name, he had a strange name, John Pond Smith, P-O-N-D. I guess that was probably German in the beginning, but it ended up Pond, I don't know. But anyway, that's what it was. And Mary Smith, they said, I read about her that, you know, back in the Civil War days, she was known as a well-known horseman and a judge of fine horses. So I guess she handed it on down to us, you know. And that's good. Well, anyway, Frank King, he gave us property for the school up here, the Carver County School. He built the house, turned to go up to the school. All my dad and there was 6 of them in the family. They were all raised there. And he was a cotton broker and had a store. He and his brother Paul King had a store. Frank King shipped a lot of cotton to New Orleans on the river. And in 1929, when the big Depression started, I have a hard time talking. When the big Depression started, well, he had a lot of money in New Orleans, and he had a lot of money here in this bank. And he got on a train to go to New Orleans to try to get his money, and they wired him up here that the banks were closing, and when he got to New Orleans, those banks were closed, and he lost everything he had. He lost his home, store building, horses, and he had a little bit of a health problem. I think he had a light stroke or something. And he ended up went to Tuscumbia and lived with Miss Henderson, which was a widow of one of his brothers. Well, he started putting together all these artifacts. People would give them to him, and of course he found some. Most of them gave them to him for him to keep them, and he started the Historical Society, and that was what that was all about. But he wrote a lot of letters to a lot of prominent people like General Joe Weaver and a lot of people that were well-known people, you know. He'd write them letters and they would correspond. And he got a whole filing cabinet of letters. And I've got that filing cabinet over there in the bank in a safe room back there. Well, the friends of the library here, they started those letters, they started making copies and filing them. and made a book of how they were filed and all that. And it took them 10 years, but they didn't work but just on Mondays. So, but it took them a long time, and they're over there. They've got all these copies, and they are filed, and you can look up a lot of stuff all right around here, you know, in Cobbett and Lawrence and Franklin County. And he just did so many things for this country, and he ended up an old man over in Tuscumbia, and he got sick, and my daddy went over and got him and brought him back and buried him over to our house, and that's where he died. But my daddy was the youngest in the family, and anyway, when Granddaddy went broke, Daddy was in the 11th grade, and he and Mr. Benny Harris came down here from Wolf Springs, and he looked kind of rough anyway. I don't know what, but anyway, my daddy made fun of him. He whooped my daddy. They become big friends. And they lived upstairs over in the Fenner Brothers store. They bunked up there, and they worked in the stores after school. And they were trying to graduate from high school. They had one old light up there. And Mr. Benny sat and read medicine on that light for 2 years. Took a pharmacy exam in the state of Alabama, passed it, and became a pharmacist. And Mr. Ed Fennell set him up in the drugstore over here. So then the cotton oil mill in Decatur, they built the Farmers Home Gin Company on the back street down here. My daddy got a job with it, and in the later years, they let him, they financed him to buy the gin. So that's where he got his start. But he and Mr. Benny were big buddies, and that's just all part of Leighton. And I tell y'all one thing I thought was kind of good. My mother, she was of old, she just, what am I talking about? Anyway, yeah, well,
School teacher.
huh?
School teacher.
Yeah, she was a school teacher. I don't know, I lost my line of thought. You know, you do that when you're 90 years old. But I'll get it back. But, well, my mother, she taught school up there, over in Leighton. But anyway, she had a large family, and they were descendants of the Scotch. They ended up on Sand Mountain. Our family came during the potato famine when they opened all the prisons. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of that was the family. She was pretty tough. But anyway, she had a brother, J.D. Briscoe, which she was really ashamed of. He's a big old tall thing, about 6'3". And all he ever did was trade mules and horses and drank whiskey. He'd get him 10 or 12 mules and horses and get them traded off, stay drunk about a week, get him 10 or 12 more. And my dad had a mule barn, and when he come through here, Dad let him trade out of that barn. My mother didn't want me to go down and hang around on the jail. But I slipped off and hung around him. I didn't learn how to drink whiskey, but I learned something about trading. And old old man came in there one Saturday evening, Uncle Jay about half drunk. He said, J.D., he said, yeah. Said, that mule you sold me? He said, yeah. Said, she died. Uncle Jay took his head off, slapped his leg, and I'll be dadgum. First time that old thing ever done that. Well, I don't know what else to talk about. I gave you the history of Frank King. I'll tell you one thing about him you didn't know, though. F.R. King. He went as F.R. King or Frank King. But his real name was Francis Rebecca. Yeah. He had a sister died as an infant, and they had named her Francis Rebecca. So he was born next, and they just gave it to him. So he went as F.R. King, Frank King, and Daddy said if he called him Francis Rebecca, he gonna haul off and hit you. I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Well,
Jimmy, tell us something about that bicycle.
oh my goodness. Why did you bring that up? I used to stay in a lot of trouble when I was growing up. Not nothing bad, but just aggravated people, you know. Like the principal of the high schools with me, and I went home, got my BB gun, shooting windows out of the school. Principal with me, my daddy with me, and he had to put some windows in. Well, he left a model up there at the house, and I slipped it off. I was in the 8th grade then. And I went to the football field doing donuts during the rain. And the coach with me, and my daddy with me. And I had to replant the football field. And then Mr. Sam Smith, he lived here in town, and every time he'd cross his yard, he'd run at you with a stick. So I got a big grocery bag full of soot out of the furnace, and we had these big old firecrackers about this long, had a few in the middle. And I put it in there in a sack, and I went down there and put it between his screen door and his regular door, you know. And he always wore a white shirt. Just before he got to the door, I lit that firecracker. And he turned white immediately, black immediately. You couldn't see nothing but the white of his eyes. But now I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. Henderson, my brother, and Ben Fennell put me up to it. They hid across the road in the bushes over there. But I got the blame and I got the whipping, and they said they didn't have nothing to do with it. Yeah. Well, a lot went on in Leighton in those days. You know, there's a brick of older boys that I wasn't part of that. They were 3 or 4 years older than me, but they put a mule in the principal's office up there at the high school. Shut him up. And they said it was a terrible mess the next morning. Well, I've told y'all I know about Frank King. So.
May I ask you, you were only 6 years old when he passed, correct?
Yeah.
Do you have any memories, even though you were such a young boy, of Mr. King?
Well, I remember him. And I remember dying in our house, and when he first came over there, he was kind of sick, and he gave me a gold ring, little gold ring. And I was wearing it, he put it on my finger, and then I lost it. I took it off somewhere. So, you know, but I remember that, and Daddy helped me up to see him in the casket, you know. we had a wake that night, you know, where we did it then. And people went and digged the grave. And we stayed up all night. And I did that, I stayed up with the wake. So my mother, he lived over there with us a good bit, up to 2 or 3 or 4 years before he died. His mother said he would talk your ear off. So as many papers and letters he wrote and all the stuff he put together, I'm sure he did. But he put a lot of good, there's a lot of artifacts over there in this museum that you need to go look at. He brought them over here, they brought him over here from Tuscumbia after he died, and put him in the, and the whole library was up above the drugstore on this side, on the south side. They put it up there, and I'd go up there as a kid and look through it all, you know, and everything, and then they moved it to the room back of the library here. I'd go back there. Well, didn't many people even know where it was and didn't know about it. But I got to talk to the Maldens and Bowling boy, what's his name? John Bowling. And we got interested in it, you know. So the Maldens took out 3 offices over there in the bank, and they got a museum people, professional people out of Montgomery to come build the cases and display all of it. And Debbie Bradford, she worked hard with it. I think she washed clean about everything in there. But it's a rather large museum. And I tell you something recently, I want to tell this. I had a group of black 12, 13-year-old girls wanted me to take them to the museum. And I spent over an hour with them. That was the nicest group of kids I've ever been around. They were real interested. They'd ask you everything in there. They never talked out of turn. And anyway, they'd say, well, what is this? And how did they use it, you know? And I really enjoyed them. And they got their mothers, when I got the mothers and brought them in there, and they was hanging all over me, taking pictures, you know. And I thought that was really good, that they were interested. Then I had one group of kids that was about half white, about half black. It was about the worst bunch of kids I ever been around. Started them in the museum, and they didn't get any further near that wall, and I got them out of there. So they was wrestling and carrying on, you know. And I got in my seat and went out there and told them, in the lobby, and told them all to sit down in front of me. The first time I ever preached a sermon. But I went to preaching. And I told them, first thing I told them, if y'all don't straighten up and learn something and try to be worth something, every one of you going to hell. They started listening. Yeah, they did. Well, I talked, I went on, and then when they had them, they brought them in a school bus, and the 2 teachers, one of the teachers came back there after they got them on the bus, come back in there to me, tears in her eye, and I thought, oh Lord, I've done something. She said, Mr. King, I'm so glad you did that. They is needing it, and we can't do it at school. I said, well, that's good. But one of the kids that we had in that first bunch of girls, I got a picture of my phone. I was down there carrying a group from Athens, grown people through there. And she had a little group of her own going through in front of us. And I got her picture in my phone, and she said, Mr. Jimmy said this. You know, that was a smart bunch of kids. That was really nice. Yeah, really good. Well, I don't know.
Does anybody else have a question for Mr. King?
What year did the King family first come to Leighton? When did they-
1826.
Okay.
Harville King came here, and then there was about 15 wagon loads of people came here, and different families. They came from Wake County, North Carolina. And the reason they came, they raised hemp and tobacco up there in North Carolina. They depleted the land. It wouldn't even make a crop hardly. They knew nothing to fertilize them. So they heard about the cotton down here, and they sold out and came here. Several families came here to raise cotton, and that's what they did.
The Indians were still settled here then, though. They
Yeah.
were removed for about 10 more years.
Yeah,
So they worked alongside the,
yeah, Harville King, he was out there at Cotton Town. Now you see, they had to buy the property, this valley in here from Andrew Jackson, because he took it from the Indians, set up a land office over in Huntsville, and most all the deeds to these farms through this valley go back to Andrew Jackson, which I thought was terrible.
yeah.
But
How many families came at that time? And were they all Kings or?
no, there was Pruitts and Fennels and Kings and Pooh, I don't know, I say,
Ricks.
down at Spring Rabbit.
Ricks.
Ricks,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, I could sit down and think of some more, but I'd have to think about it.
How are you related to Percy King?
Well, his granddaddy, Mr. Bruce King, and my granddaddy, Frank King, we talking about, were first cousins.
I knew
Yeah.
his family had been here a long time.
Yeah. They descended from Robert King, a son of Hartwell, and we came from Richard King, it was son of Hartwell. So we all kin, everybody in Leighton's kin, there wasn't nobody here much but families that came, you know, and they all intermarried now. That's the reason we go around flipping our lip. Yeah. But, yeah, Harville, his old daddy, Richard came with him. I got Richard's baby shoe. I put it in the museum the date of 1752. And he was old, and they got here and they went back to North Carolina to settle some business. And Hartwell died on the trip. Requested Hartwell to bring him back and bury him at his new home in Alabama. Well, Hartwell put him in a barrel of whiskey and hauled him back. And in there in the museum and that stuff I put in there, there's a little metal box of these homemade rusty nails. The note says nails from the lid of the whiskey barrel that helped Richard King. And I read that was kind of prominent in those days. They didn't have much way to transport a body. And my old brother said, I wonder what they did with the whiskey. I sure hope they poured it out. I tell y'all the truth, I made that up. That's right. I get a boy out there walking down the creek bank, his